Good day, viewers. Welcome to a new edition of 30 Minutes with me, Manir Dan Ali. Our guest today is someone who is heading the National Emergency Management Agency of Nigeria, which is NEMA, and who has worked at the Debt Management Office and has also worked as an executive director, as from a senior manager's position has risen to be an executive director at the Federal Mortgage Bank. I'm talking of none other than Hajia Zubaida Umar. Hajia, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
I'm wondering, for most Nigerians, when they say NEMA, what they see is your trucks delivering food items to and other relief materials, whether blankets, mats, and what have you. Is there something more than that to NEMA?
Oh, thank you very much. And there definitely is much more to NEMA. The Nigerian Emergency Management Agency is saddled with the responsibility of managing disasters across the country as they happen. And our major mandate is to ensure preparedness of the country to face disasters as they happen, and to also deal with disaster response. That is when they happen. Post-disaster, what happens after that? That also includes the issue of recovery. What is going to happen to Nigerians after a particular disaster happens, and how do we go back? We have
do you, for example, in the post-disaster, you visit the scene and see what has happened? Maybe people still need help, or maybe some promise to fix a broken bridge, whether it has happened or not happened.
Yes,
is that the case?
Yes, absolutely. So after disasters, we carry out assessments. And one of the misconceptions is that they see NEMA as an agency that once a disaster strikes, they're expecting us to, after the intervention, maybe 2 days later, you go and give the rice and the mattress. No, NEMA does much more than that. We carry out assessments and we do interventions much later down the road. For example, I just got back from Kaduna State. You see, there was a disaster that occurred in Tudumbiri. And what
where the Air Force mistakenly struck those people who were gathering for Maulud celebration and killed scores of people.
Absolutely. So part of the recovery efforts is constructing a resettlement area for them. And it has gone very far and it's quite impressive. And not just that, mentally as well. Like when I was there yesterday, I had a meeting with the community leaders where you sit and get them prepared, and they're very, very excited. And part of that thing we're doing, we've also included schools for them where you can come, and that school will service not just that community, but 50 different communities that live around it.
But do you do exactly that everywhere, or is it because Tudumbiri was special, it's like struck a chord in many people's heart, and there are lots of contribution? Are you doing exactly this in every disaster case?
Not in every disaster case. Like I said, it depends. We started with Tudumbiri as our pilot. However, we're going down to 6 other states. As I speak to you, we're moving to Niger, where cases of banditry have occurred. We're also going to other parts of Kaduna, one more part of Kaduna. We're going to Kebbi, we're going to Zamfara. We all know what's happening these days. We're going to Sokoto as well, the Sokeza states. So this is like a pilot scheme for us, and we're going fully out to be able to do that.
But are you sure you can cope? Because banditry is so widespread, and in just one state, so many communities are affected. We know that in, say, Katsina, and I hear lately in Niger State, there are hundreds of villages that have been deserted. Are you going to be able to go to each and every location like that?
Well, absolutely not. We can't say that we're going to. That is why I called it a pilot scheme. We're trying to test the waters to see what we can achieve. And like I always say, you know, whenever there's an issue like this, everybody is quick to say NEMA, NEMA. We're a coordinating body. We can't even access those locations without the civil defense, without the military. So it's all about coordination. We also need to be protected. So we're stepping into the states to see how we can carry on with this. But we're starting with pilot schemes where there's relative safety, where we know that even when we relocate people, they're not going to be kicked out all of a sudden.
You mentioned coordination. Does it mean you work hand in hand with the state emergency management agencies, the same as, and is the work quite well coordinated?
Oh, absolutely. As a rule, we cannot go into a state and just carry out functions without the State Emergency Management Agency. Like we always say, all disaster is local. It has a starting point. And your State Emergency Management Agency should be your first line responder. I mean, I'm here in Abuja. We have zonal offices. For example, in Sokoto, if anything breaks out in Kebbi, then we'll need to travel. And that time that you waste really matters. So yes, we do everything with the State Emergency Management Agencies. We do most of our work with the Nigerian Red Cross, for example. We also do a lot with the military, with the civil. So what we do is we coordinate these things. And in case you've noticed, or maybe you've seen, we have constant coordination forums, and it's all part of our preparation. In the event a disaster strikes, who plays what role?
Do you also have like the zonal, whether is it big storage facilities where you have all this rice, all these mattresses, all these blankets that are stored there, so that if it is Sokoto, you go to wherever it is nearest to there and pack this thing and get there? Or do you have to all take them from Abuja to those locations?
No. We definitely have warehouses across the country where in the event a disaster strikes, we should be able to respond. So we're able to stockpile beforehand, and it's all part of preparedness so that it doesn't take us unawares.
Do you run on your own steam? I mean, do you have the finances to do all these things, to buy all these materials together and do all the other logistical things that you need to do? Or is it with the support of other partners, both local and international? Well,
currently we're actually quite underfunded, so we're not able to do much in terms of stockpiling. But what we did last year was to look outwards and engage other organizations. For example, the Dangote Flood Committee, we engaged them, and they did quite a lot for us in terms of providing us with food. We also contacted the FIRS. They were also able to supply us with food items, same as the Bank of Industry. And then you have well-meaning Nigerians that were able to come and give us some of their contributions, which we ensured that to the last grain, every single thing was distributed.
What about the international aspect of it? Do the World Food Program, for example, or the International Red Cross and all the other international do-gooders, do they come through you when they want to help?
Yes, we actually have a lot of meetings with them, and once there's like a disaster, we go all out together. They also help us in terms of training of staff. For example, we're proposing to have another coordination forum because we just received the seasonal climate prediction from NISA.
Yes.
And now that we've gotten that report, we're running with it to see what we can do. It's all about risk reduction. You know, we're in 2025. Rather than wait for it to happen, we want to see that we're being proactive. So yes, we do a lot with them.
Yeah, I do see in your functions that there's all this scenario building and planning so that you are not waiting for the disaster to happen. Mm-hmm. And one of which is flooding. Mm-hmm. It occurs every year. And then we see that in many cases the response is late. And in some instances, when you go to the communities, they say, no, we haven't seen any government official here. Why is it the case?
Well, you know, we're very difficult people to deal with. I can clearly tell you that the response is hardly ever late. And I want us to all be objective when we look at these things. So you have a community that is, sometimes it's not even motorable. I'll give you an example of what happened in Borno State recently, last year, unprecedented floods, and the response was rapid. And whenever,
but that's in Maiduguri, the capital, yes, is which has an airport.
Absolutely.
And all the connecting roads into Maiduguri.
Absolutely.
But it's not, say, in some remote location, it's not in Baga by the shores of the Lake Chad. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But that's the reason why it's easy for you to respond in that particular case quickly.
We were able to, yes, the first response would be where you have immediate access. However, don't forget that as part of the coordination, and we had been planning ahead of time, it was unprecedented. Nobody expected that it would be that bad.
But the Borno example you are giving, the Maiduguri, there are reports that that dam was being breached. Even the state governor, I mean the SSG, the state secretary to the state government, visited a few days before the incident, mm-hmm, and he somehow made the pronouncement that all was okay with that dam. And then lo and behold, a few days after, it's just breached and submerged everywhere. So it's not like we didn't know. We knew, and maybe we didn't take the action necessary in time.
Well, you know, like every disaster, some you would have limits to where you would control it. You see, when you look at it, the Borno state government did excellently well in terms of response, in terms of being there. Yes, there could have been. The deputy governor visited. You're just letting me know now. But some of these things are quite technical. And when I keep saying that, most people, when they see these things, they point at NEMA. NEMA is not in charge of restoring bridges or dams, for example. You have agencies that are in charge of that. And I think all is being done to be able to rectify all across the country to ensure that we do not have those type of cases.
Are you saying we've learned enough lesson from that Alau Dam incident that submerged a large part of Maiduguri and surrounding communities? Because as we are now, 2-3 months to the rainy season in that part of the country, nothing has been done beyond what we've been told, budget for the dam. Not actual repair has started.
Lessons are never learned. Enough lessons are never learned. We keep learning. But I know that from what I've seen and heard, that a lot is being done to see that these things are fixed, not just for Borno State, but for other infrastructure as well.
What about the lower Niger part, where you see that probably the flooding will start around the upper area, and then lo and behold, it will get to the lower part of the Niger, and then you see whole communities being submerged, being affected, and then the cries for humanitarian aid. Are they not listening, or are you not giving enough warning to people about this impending kind of disasters?
Yes, we all know and we can see the predictions, and over the years we can tell where the waters start till they move all the way to the south. However, you know, we have this sort of attachment. It's not only Nigeria, it's all over the world where you see things happening. It happened recently in the US where people were refusing to evacuate, you know, and we see this a lot. For example, last year, before immediately we got the reports, we swung into action, started with the coordination forum where we all agreed on what everyone is meant to do. And we went to each and every state, the 36 states. We wrote to the state governments, we sent reminders, and the purpose was for us to identify high grounds where we know that these waters will pass and we relocate people immediately. We went down to even identifying routes that people will follow so that in case there's an emergency, you quickly rush to those higher grounds. You find a lot of refusal with people. They decide that it's something that comes every year and we can do and get rid of it. However, a lot of states were able to prepare higher grounds for people to be able to evacuate and move. We didn't stop at states. We went down to local government areas, not just for floods, even these fires that have been occurring. From November, December, that was all we were doing.
Which is the usual season of fires because of Hamatan and the dryness and the winds.
Absolutely, yes.
What about the building collapses? Because again, we tend to see NEMA at building collapse sites, and then inevitably many cases you will hear that actually the relevant authorities have marked some of those buildings for demolition, which never got demolished until they maybe demolish human lives with them. Why is it the case?
Non-adherence to building codes, mostly. And we've seen quite a lot of those collapses in markets, you know, in schools. I've been here for just how long, but I've seen quite a number of cases. And I think all the cases I've seen are nothing but non-adherence to building codes. State governments will need to do much more in terms of ensuring that developers adhere to building codes. And we're pushing that, and we're also sensitizing, not just for what government can do, but for what individuals, residents of those buildings, what they need to do. You can see that your building is coming down, but you're still living in it with children. The case we saw in Plateau was a very unfortunate case. School children lost their lives just because someone was not willing to adhere to building codes. And a lot of these governments are taking action, because by the time I went to Plateau, the governor had already, you know, issued warnings, notices, but you need...
But this is after the event.
After the event, absolutely. But But to be fair on them, they started these things way before the event. However, adherence, and I think also not just adherence, insisting that people need to do the right thing.
Very interesting point you are making there, but I think it's about time we go on a short break and resume the conversation thereafter.
Thank you.
Viewers, it is 30 minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television, and our guest today is the Director General of the National Emergency Management Agency, Hajia Zubaida Umar. Welcome back. It is still 30 minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television, and our guest today is the DG of NEMA, Hajia Zubaida Umar. Hajia, you are just about a year in office. You were appointed in the second week of March last year. What has been your biggest challenge since you assumed office?
My biggest challenge since I assumed office is funding.
Funding. You
Absolutely.
don't have enough money, which is common everywhere. Nobody, even at individual levels, we don't have enough money. So what are you doing to address that? Is it more budgetary allocations, getting the National Assembly members to see things from your perspective, or what are you doing?
Yes, so like you rightly pointed out, even I as an individual always complain of my own budgetary provisions. However, I want you to understand the role that NEMA plays. We cover all the states of the Federation. We also, not just all the state governments, we cover the local government areas, anywhere disaster strikes. And it is like a household name, to the point that a lot of agencies are forgotten. It's always NEMA, NEMA. So definitely funding is a challenge. What we have done is to think outside the box by contacting relevant agencies, non-governmental agencies that could assist. And so far it has really, really helped us, like I mentioned earlier on. And it is what we've continued this year. We've already had engagements with BOI. We're going towards NMPC.
Yeah, the Bank of Industry.
Absolutely. We're going towards the NMPC, where we'll just gather support. We know that there's a lot of pressure on the federal government in terms of funding. So we're thinking outside the box to see how we'll be able to assist Nigerians without necessarily depending on the allocated budget.
What's the allocated budget for this year, for example, the one that you may just have defended before the members of the National Assembly?
Well,
is it in billions or in a little around trillion naira, since we are in the era of trillions?
I'll give that feedback when we get approval. We're still defending it, so I'll let you
But does it sound like it's going to be higher than what it has always been?
No, it doesn't. But National Assembly is looking into it. We presented and they asked us to go and come back and tidy up a few things before they table it again and see what can be done.
How much of that amount will be subsumed or taken up by just your bureaucracy? That's salaries, overhead.
You know, our salaries come directly from IPPIS. So whatever we get as part of our own funding internally is just for running the organization. And like I told you, what I'm really trying to achieve is to see that we move away from always relying on this idea of palliatives. Let's see what we can do in terms of preparedness. That is much more important. What we do in terms of search and rescue, much more important. Palliatives, yes, they will come, but we're trying to see how we can do better by preparing ahead of time.
Unfortunately, you can't do internally generated revenue because you can't bill people who are just recovering from disasters. As we've seen in some government agencies, the clever way is IGR. So is there something else that you could do? Are you tightening up and maybe not giving big contracts or at huge, with huge parts when you are giving your contract, since you have to keep a lot of items in your storage warehouses?
Well, absolutely. Right now we actually don't have too many items, and we're really tightening up, like you said. You know, what used to be cannot be today. It's not Nigeria, it's all over the world. Things have really changed. And I get a lot of those comments to say that, we're used to, we can't do it anymore. We cannot afford it. And even when the non-governmental agencies come to us, UN and other, That is the mantra for everybody. Things have changed. We're tightening the noose. So rather than rushing to think that we're giving huge contracts to purchase these things, we're rushing to see that people are educated enough. State governments are taking responsibility. Agencies are things that need to be fixed. Recently, when I assumed work, and after the floods, UAE, for example,
United Arab Emirates
gave us some of their contributions. And what we're able to do was to insist that each and every state comes to receive these things. We count the numbers, we give it to you, it's documented, we know we've handed over. And what we're trying to introduce, and we have already introduced now, is monitoring and evaluation. Quietly going into the system to ask the people what exactly happened. Did you get this? Did you get that? Like I said, some systems just happen to be beyond your control, and people should be able to see the difference between the national emergency and the state emergency. I cannot go down to say that I'm looking to see after I have already handed over. Personally, I handed over to some of those victims, and then we left for them to be able to finish the coordination. Then you get reports of people saying, after you left, bags were broken. There should be some form of responsibility from the state officials that are also there. So they should be able to answer the questions better. But we'll continue with our monitoring and evaluation and see how we can introduce issues of, and anytime I hear of these things, I contact the state governments to say, we're hearing this, is that true? Is it possible that this could have happened? And we'll keep doing it till we're able to. If we don't come together as Nigerians to agree that it's for the benefit of everybody, there's a limit to which you can do these things.
After about air on the seat, what will you say are the big three possibly national emergencies that Nigeria faces?
The biggest one being the floods. That is a real, disaster that will come. It will always be there. It's all over the world. Second one, I would say, would be fires.
But we don't have forest fires like we've just seen in Los Angeles, America, and other places. We are lucky in that respect.
Most of our fires that we have are man-made disasters, not natural disasters. And we're generally lucky. Nigeria, apart from the floods, you don't see us with tsunamis or anything. And,
or windstorm.
Windstorms do happen, actually, especially up north. But then it's not to the magnitude that
tornadoes.
So those are the three that I would say. Building collapse, quite important. That is also man-made.
What about environmental ones? Because you see that places that 10 years ago were forested, now they are bare. We have this practice now because of poverty. Most Nigerians actually use charcoal to cook. They can't afford gas. Is this something that in your scenario building you are considering how to deal with this? Because otherwise a few years down the line we will have bigger challenges to do with the environment.
So you see, we are still going back to what we said earlier. Most of the disasters we have are actually man-made. Yes, there's climate change. Yes, there's an increase in population. We're expecting an increase in disasters as population is increasing. However, when you look at it, afforestation, your deforestation is right there. We're cutting our trees ourselves. I mean, trees that have been there for hundreds of years are being cut now to be able to. All you have to do is to keep sensitizing people on the needs, why you need it. Even for floods, farmers need to get engaged to understand what they can do with these flood waters. Are we just going to let it affect our houses? Can we do the wet farming so that we see how people can benefit from it? So we'll keep promoting the issue of afforestation for that. We have windstorms up north, of course, because of the topography, so you can understand why we have them. However, for all the fires we see, it's either candles are being lit or what happened recently in Zamfara State for the school that got burnt. You can imagine there were
But then there is also the recurring cases of the petrol tanker fires.
Absolutely, yes. That's a very major one. As you can see, NMPC has also stepped in to see. It all has to do with safety, a lot of safety, and then also the infrastructure. For example, what happened when I visited Niger State, you could see that the road had no shoulder. And at some point, I think the guy tried to overtake and he tipped over. So even the safety of tying the trucks and the tankers, we've had several meetings, including a coordination forum, and we intend to have more to see how it can be enforced. The law.
But why is the government more like trying to be punitive? Because now somebody is suggesting that maybe charge more against these tankers so that they have to pay more, and which they will eventually pass on to consumers. Why are we punitive when these things happen instead of thinking through rationally and suggesting better options?
I don't believe that this will be punitive. I think that there's a lot of work going on right now to see what can be done to avert those situations. And like I said to you, that includes not just the tanker drivers. We all understand there's a problem. Some of them that we spoke to actually said they travel at night because they have moments where they're also afraid of the routes that they plowed. Some of them want to rest at the wrong time. Some of them don't sleep for 48 hours, and you see these type of incidents occurring.
Happening. You kept mentioning that all disasters are local. How is your relationship with all the different layers? The state government, you have to deal with governors, and now it's a political setting. You deal with all sorts of politicians, reps, senators, local government chairman. How do you do this without maybe rubbing people the wrong way or not getting the result you desire?
Well, we're coping, and so far it's been a good relationship. We try to make everybody understand that disasters have no color, they have no race, they have no party. Once there's a disaster, we go all out to see how we can augment. And we've had quite good working relationships with the states, especially because of the state emergency management agencies. And I'd like to use this forum to also appeal for states that do not have emergency management agencies to please support them. They truly need them. They're not just a department. No, a state emergency management agency is very, very necessary. And that will also reduce the pressure and burden on the federal level, which you know we have. There's a lot of it, and even with the National Assembly, once there's anything, it's always referred back to NEMA. We tend to forget that the states have a role to also play. But so far the relationship has been quite okay, and we're managing it.
So what will you change or do differently if you have the chance, to make Nigeria's disaster preparedness and response better than it is in 30 seconds?
What I can change is to get Nigerians to act. We need to act, and when disasters strike, it is not about the federal government. It is about you and me. It's about every single individual. Be your brother's keepers. You see a disaster strikes, it's only in Nigeria that you find people coming out on social media to complain this has not been done. It's about community action. We need to come out and play a role. It's much more than the government. Everyone has a role to play in this. And I hope that we join hands and play that role together.
There you have it.
Thank you.
Hajia Zubaida Umar, the DG of National Emergency Management Agency. Thank you for coming onto the program.
Thank you very much.
Viewers, that's the end of this edition of 30 Minutes. Keep a date with us.